Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. Today we have Netflix 394th film from 2021. It's the romantic comedy called Good on Paper. It's directed by Kimmy Gatewood and stars Iliza Shlesinger, Ryan Hansen, Margaret Cho, and Rebecca Rittenhouse. I'm Jesse. I am your host. Thank you for joining me today for this episode. We are getting very, very close to our 400th show. Wow. That's a big achievement, I guess. We have done more than 400 episodes, but our 400th actual episode, that's wild. So only a couple of weeks away. But we are obviously here today to talk a little bit about Good on Paper. So if this is a romantic comedy that you haven't seen and you're interested in checking out, give us a pause and come back a little bit later on, because we will spoil this film as we go through this show. We start the show with the Fast Flicks, where we do a quick little summary of what the film is all about. So this one's about a girl who's in a bit of a rut. She meets a man who may not be exactly who he says he is. Yeah, there we go. Maybe he's just good on paper. I don't know. Oh my God, I'm going to struggle with this one. I've said there's going to be spoilers. So let's talk about this film. What am I thinking? This is a Netflix film. So how did it end up on Netflix? Good on Paper, obviously, as I sort of led to there, is about this man. He might look good on paper, but maybe he's not. What is it called around the world? So in Spanish, it's called Storybook Love. Not sure anyone watched the film with this translation. Anyway, the other titles, Portuguese, it's called At Second Sight. I kind of get where that's coming. In French and Romanian, it's called In Theory. Sure. Chinese, it's called Love Exposure. Interesting. Finnish, Perfect in Theory. Greek, Good in Theory. Italian, It Seemed Perfect. And instead, sure, in Polish. And it was supposed to be so beautiful. Oh, wow. In Russian, it's called Smooth on Paper. Not bad. Turkish, Who Are You? Question mark. Sure, good question. Vietnamese, it's not often they give... I've written a note here. So Vietnamese, it's not often that they give a good film title, but this may be their best. It is called The Ideal Guy in Theory. There we go. I can't even read my show notes properly. The tagline for this film was, if he checks all your boxes, check again. There we go. That's why this guy, we shouldn't trust what he's doing. Like I said in the title, this is based on a true story, I guess. So another tagline that it had was that a true love story from the comedy mind of Iliza Shlesinger. So this was inspired by a real life experience where she originally shared in her 2015 stand-up segment called Lying Brian, or I think it was also on this show called This Is Not Happening. And this story, her real life story, involved a man who falsely claimed to be a Yale graduate and hedge fund manager. Shlesinger adapted the incident into this fictionalized screenplay, which blended commentary with comedy on deception and dating culture. We go to April of 2020, where it was announced that she would star in the lead role, with Kimmy Gatewood making her directorial debut. The supporting cast includes Ryan Hansen, Margaret Cho, and Rebecca Rittenhouse. The film was produced by Universal Pictures and then distributed by Netflix. And you see the big Universal logo at the start of the film, which took me by surprise a little bit. Principal photography did begin in November of 2019 and finished in December of the same year, and it was filmed in and around Los Angeles in America. Ryan Hansen, he plays the main male character in this film, and he wore fake teeth in this film to change his appearance, and he put padding around his abdomen to make it look like he had a belly. And there was also a body double used in a pool scene. I have to say, it was quite obvious that was a body double in the pool scene. This did hit Netflix worldwide on the 23rd of June 2021. What are the critics and audiences saying about this film? On Rotten Tomatoes, it's at 51%. That's on 39 reviews, so that is rotten. Audience even a little bit lower, 38%. That's on more than 250 ratings. A little bit higher on IMDb, where it sits at a 5.6 out of 10 on 15,000 ratings. We go back to Letterboxd on that low end side, where it sits at a 2.4 out of 5 on 16,500 ratings, but it's actually been logged by 24,000 people. So overall, probably say mediocre results. I've got to say, when I was reading a lot of reviews, a lot of positive reviews about this film. But what are my early thoughts? What am I thinking about this film? Unfortunately, it's not funny. I think there's 3 humorous parts in this film, but none of these come from the lead comedian. None of these come from the main character. And the film overall, it felt too obvious, too explicit, and too tonally deaf to actually enjoy. So not very positive from me for this film. Let's talk about the characters. What are the characters in this film like? So Andrea, this is, I guess, the ulterior or the alternative character to Iliza Shlesinger. So she's given herself a fictional name, but this character is a stand-up comedian in the film, like she's in real life, and she's in a bit of a rut because she doesn't seem to have love or anyone that she can love in her life, and she's super focused on her career and not just the comedic side of things, but in the acting world as well. So it doesn't have time for love, and I guess this all seems to change when she meets this guy called Dennis. Their relationship, it almost starts off as like a BFFL, best friends forever life. I'm not sure. I'm not good with terminology, but it turns into this romance, I guess, in a situation which almost proves to Andrea why she has focused on herself and her career rather than others in the first place. Because this Dennis guy, this is that guy that she meets on a plane, tells her in the film, like we heard in a real life story, that he went to Yale and manages hedge funds. But it's super clear as soon as you meet him on screen as an audience that he's a creep. And this meant that there was no real reveal of him actually being a bit of a douchebag. The audience already knew that. So the reveal in the film, it just felt off. And this is probably where I'm going to start to talk a little bit about some of the struggles in this film for me. The other side character is Margot. Margot is Andrea's best friend. She runs a bar, so Andrea loves to have a drink there, and this Dennis guy's a bit of a part-time alcoholic almost. And Margot sticks by Andrea through everything. She's, like I sort of said before, the only comedy in the film almost, and the one who highlights to Andrea multiple times that there's something off with Dennis, which Andrea ignores, but the audience has already been knowledgeable about since the opening scene, so it just doesn't work. Serena's the only other character I'll talk about. This is Andrea's arch enemy almost, or rival, in every acting role that she chases or follows. That they moved to Los Angeles together at the same time to make it big, and Serena's made it. Andrea hasn't, so Andrea is very envious of this Serena character. Very interesting, very, very, very interesting. Other than that, let's sort of talk that the director I sort of mentioned before, first directing credit. So that's a nice sort of thing. I think a lot of acting credits. There was a Netflix original show called Glow that came out a few years ago that I watched a little bit. So she was the character Stacy in that Netflix show, and also I believe has directed an episode of Sesame Street. So that's an interesting little side note there as well. Let's talk about the scenes in this film. What stood out, what didn't work, the things that worked for me. Margaret, I sort of said before, thoroughly enjoyed her in the back end. Especially, there's this scene where she has this full spy kit ready to go to try and find Dennis and his house and where he lives. I thought that was humorous. That was good. These are the three. There are three things, and they're all Margot things. So the second thing, Margot and Andrea, they're having a bit of an argument, a bit of a blue, a bit of an argy-bargy on the street about how she's been led down the wrong path by this Dennis guy. Andrea tries to blame Margot for telling her to jump out of her shell to do this. They hug, they make up. And then they sort of talk about we need to make Dennis pay for this, and you need to take control of your life. Or Andrea says, I need to take control of my life. And then there's a car driving by the street, and someone yells out of the window of the car, like, eat a dick, lady. That was funny. And then Margot, she's like, we'll get revenge on him. We'll take pictures of Dennis having sex with a goat. Very humorous as well. The other one, Margot gives Dennis so much alcohol that he passes out, and then just throws like a cardboard box over the top of him. That was humorous. And then Andrea arrives so they can get this revenge thing happening, and they drag him inside out of the alleyway, and he gets stuck in the doorway. He's passed out at this stage. A bit of his body, a bit of his flesh falls off. They freak out. That was funny. And then they're talking about it getting infected. So Andrea offers to cauterize the wound. She gets this blowtorch and some alcohol on him. That was humorous. I like that. But the things that didn't work, there's a few things, and it's hard because there's not big things that stand out. It's just a lot of the film didn't work. But the opening stand-up of Andrea and then her auditioning, it just wasn't humorous. And I guess that's almost the worst way to start a film. If you're expecting it to be a comedy and you don't laugh at any of the punchlines in the first 5 minutes, it's going to be a tough watch. And I guess those first 2 minutes of Dennis talking to Andrea on the plane, and he says something along the lines of, my girlfriend's a model, but she can't see me tonight because her photo shoot got moved. You could tell he was a creep straight away, and that just ruined the rest of the film. Throughout the film, there's all these medical nursing stuff that Andrea apparently knows from being on a nurse television show at some stage on ABC, she says. Please, she can't get an acting gig. So to me, this was really tough or a hard thing to swallow when we see that she's trying to audition for this show the whole way through and wants to make it, but she knows all this stuff because she's been on a TV show. I don't know, that just didn't make sense. There's this gym scene where Margot and Andrea are working out and Serena, the enemy's in the background. There was no need for this scene other than drop a little bit of spice between Serena and Andrea. It just didn't need to be there. There's this round of golf with Andrea's cousin. It just highlights again how big a liar Dennis is, and he throws his back out trying to be funny, and it just wasn't funny. Dennis pulls out this ugly ring for Andrea to sort of tell her how much that she means to him, and she hates it. But we're told as an audience, instead of just looking at her facial expressions and how awkward she is, we get this voiceover telling us how ugly she thinks it is. As I said before, the voiceover throughout didn't really work for me. And the whole ending, it goes to court, this assault case that Dennis takes her to court, and it just changed the tone of the film, especially Andrea's speech. It just wasn't empowering. So it just, I don't know, it just ended very flatly. So a little bit disappointing for me. Some themes, some ideas. And the film does do a few of these things in a good way. And obviously the idea of this film is about lying and the deceit and what that can bring. And I think a good little side reference in this film is at the bar that Margot runs, there's this bottle of whiskey that's referred to a few times. I think it was called Briog, or it was a, I can't remember, what sort of word is it? Gaelic? I think it was a Gaelic word. Anyway, so apparently this is a made-up brand, but it means lie or deception as well, which is obviously the theme and the idea of the movie. So that was clever, well done. The emotional trauma throughout this film that lies can create as well. There's a lot about sisterhood and feminine intuition and listening to your friends and following your gut instinct. That's done well as well. And then those gendered sexual politics almost too, the misogyny of Dennis and how poor he is, especially in the back end when he actually starts speaking his truth. And the idea too that women should be granted the same rights and judged by the same standards as men, which is a good thing to bring up as a topic of discussion. And relationships too, there's the idea of the platonic relationship and how it might be hard at times for men to have that because they want that romantic side of things, and seeing the good in people at times when you probably need to be seeing things other than just the good too. Also, changing that way you operate, like the idea, don't be salty with life. Try and take the positives and move on from there too. What did I take away from this film? I think I've touched on this anyway, but the cutaways to the stand-up, it just didn't work for me. I know it was helping progress the narrative and it matched up with what we were seeing on screen, but it just, the jokes in that stand-up didn't land for me either. And especially through the voiceover, it's like they added that on further to the stand-up segments to make sure that the audience were keeping up with what was going on. It's not that complex a film. You don't need that. So that frustrated me at times too. IMDb, we have a moment where we say, hey, did we jump on IMDb to check anyone out in the film? I had to look up Iliza Shlesinger. I didn't know her, and obviously she wrote this. She stars in it. She's a comedian, obviously, in real life. She won a television show on NBC called Last Comic Standing, and that's where she got her break almost, it looks like. Hosted a couple of other television shows, like a dating show called Excused and a game show called Separation, Anxiety, I think. So never heard of either of those, but has released 6 comedy specials on Netflix and has her own sketch show on Netflix. So obviously, big part of Netflix's brand at stages here throughout their history. And has been in 2 Netflix original films, which we've covered on this show, and I didn't even recognize her. She was in Spencer Confidential, which was a Mark Wahlberg film that we covered a while ago, as well as, is it Jodie Comer, the Pieces of a Woman film, which I really enjoyed. So she was in that as well. And now looks like, though, maybe that deal with Netflix is done, because it looks like her 2025 content is on Amazon from now on. So that's an interesting little takeaway there as well. All right, some questions, some pondering, some thoughts, some ideas. This Dennis character, I don't know, he just didn't sell it. You put some glasses on the guy and give him a comb over, and you expect, and a fat bodysuit, and you expect to make him come off as a nerd. Like this Ryan Hansen guy, obviously a bit of a good-looking sort of guy, and he's playing this, against the type of what he was. Like surely, and this probably just reminds me a bit of that Glenn Powell film that came out where he played that sort of hitman. What was it called? I think it was called Hitman, possibly. Like someone like that maybe would have worked a little bit better. That was more recognizable to add a bit more flavor to this film. But obviously, costs and who you can get in a film are all up to chance and what you're given, I guess. A couple of things that I read online through some reviews. And they all tie in very well together and probably tie into where I'm going to finish up with this film. But there's a website called realgood.com.au, and in their reference, they said, the film may be good on paper, but that's not where modern movie reviews are written. Another, very clever. Plays on the title, good on paper, funny. Another one, much like the title suggests, this is a story that would have been good on paper. Haha, very funny. And one last one. Watching this film is like staring at a blank piece of A4 paper. Nothing there to enjoy, nothing there to hate. It just exists as a blank canvas. Whack, whack, whack. So a lot of people obviously have played on those lines of the title of good on paper. I'm not that clever. I'm not clever enough to come up with anything like that. But they all sort of tie in together. Like, this film exists. It's not absolutely horrendous, but it's just not great. and that's what I'm going to wrap up with. My final thoughts on this film. Give it a rating out of 5. And, I think I probably was really hating on this film for a majority of it. It did mildly get a little bit better when that Margot character had some humor. But I think through my comment, it felt a little bit disrespectful to the audience who are watching this at home. And in a film like this, I think that it was tricky. Through that character of Dennis, you need to second guess almost that whole time if this guy that she's falling for is actually bad or not. Unfortunately, you knew from the get-go, you knew from the start that this guy was a bit of a creep, so it wasn't engaging. So I wasn't hooked on that film, and that's where it really let me down, I would say. So I'm giving this a 1.5 out of 5. Pretty low for me. We're on socials. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, and we have X, formerly known as Twitter. The question that I wanted to put out there for this episode was, and this ties in with some of the themes and the ideas, is why is it when women do certain things, they're judged so much more harshly than men? And I think this film probably does a good idea of highlighting that as well. Why is it that women are expected to be nice to each other? Why can't they judge each other? Why are men allowed to get away with what they get away with and have multiple different partners, whereas that's not on for women apparently because of what society says? And I think that's probably leads to it, that our society needs to change in its values and its thoughts and move more forward, be more progressive. And I think hopefully that's something that you can take away from this film. Other than that, we are back next week. We have a 2021 film next week, but this is an animated adult comedy called America, the Motion Picture. So a little bit different. This is directed by Matt Thompson, stars the voices of Channing Tatum, Jason Mantzoukas, Olivia Munn, Bobby Moynihan, Judy Greer, Will Forte, Roll Max Trujillo, Killer Mike, Simon Pegg, and Andy Samberg. Some big names there. I'm excited. I remember when this came out, I remember seeing posters for this. So I haven't actually watched it. I'm excited to see it. So hopefully you are too. Give it a watch before next week. As always, thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next week.